I wanted to record a quick update today, shorter than usual. We're having a church picnic at Fellowship Bible Chapel, so I'm going to record this, just the presentation, in sort of what we would call classic style. Today's title, and you'll see why I think in a few moments, is called May You Live in Interesting Times. We talk each week about the convergence of the signs, of all the different things that will happen in the end times according to the prophetic scriptures. And we certainly are I think we can say without question, we're in a stage setting time where the stage is being set for things to actually be fulfilled. And when they are fulfilled, they will happen in very rapid fashion. In fact, this week in foreign policy, even secular people are realizing that this time is different. This is something that we have not really seen in the generations that are alive today. And the pace of everything, look at what the title says, 2016, the theory behind a very bad year, and it's only half over. And the subtitle, the pace of violent and chaotic events around the world is speeding up. That's probably not a coincidence. Look at some of the quotes from this article. This is a quote that's attributed to Lenin. I don't know if he actually said it. There are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen. I think we're certainly in the latter time. The French writer Chateaubriand, the article says, quipped that during the quarter century of the French Revolution and Napoleonic regime, many centuries elapsed. I've talked about this a lot before, about how as we get closer to the end, there will be an acceleration of prophetic events happening and being fulfilled in very rapid succession. We've been in a rather long lull, although I think things changed with the founding of the nation of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel, in 1948. I think they picked up a little bit more in 1967, but now we're seeing things happening as we talk about the convergence of things happening very, very rapidly. It's very difficult to keep up. And this week, I'm not going to be able to cover everything that happened. I'm only going to try to give you some idea of just some of the important things that I saw happening this week. We started off the week, and it was last Sunday during my talk that we found out that 3 officers had been shot and killed in Baton Rouge. It seems like that happened a month ago now because of all the things that happened this week. I mentioned last week, I talked a little bit about some of the things that were happening in Jerusalem with regard to the Temple Mount. I showed some video of people going up onto the Temple Mount, or trying to get up on the Temple Mount, actually announcing a priestly blessing there. And there's been this increasing push for the temple, the third temple, to be rebuilt. You see the video playing there that was put out by the Temple Institute about last year. It seems like it was a long time ago, with some of the actual plans, schematics, and renderings that they have of what the temple will actually look like. As I was studying some things this week, I ran across a couple of verses, or a verse, that I thought I would share with you, because I think that it is a very important thing. You see here in the video, by the way, that picture there of the crown, the triple crown of the Messiah. It's a prophetic thing, and this is what they're planning on putting into the temple. But as I was studying some passages this week, I ran across this passage, because I think this is a perfect prophecy of what will happen. And when it happens, it will happen very quickly. Isaiah chapter 63, verse 18. The people of thy holiness have possessed it but a little while. Our adversaries have trodden down thy sanctuary. Now, we know from the prophetic scriptures that there is coming a time when the Jews will build a temple. There are a number of prophecies related to what happens during the 70th week that presume the existence of a Jewish temple of some sort on the Temple Mount. It may be just a tabernacle, it may be a temporary structure. But what's important to remember is, according to Isaiah chapter 63, verse 18, and other prophetic scriptures, when they get this temple built, they will only have it a little while. Now, we could probably tie in some other timing scriptures, and I really don't have time to go into that this week, but maybe we'll look at that in the future. But there will be the reinstitution of sacrifices in the temple, and they will exist for a period of time, but they will be cut off in the middle of the 70th week by the person we know as the son of perdition. We also call him the Antichrist. So here's a prophetic scripture that is on the cusp of being fulfilled. When they get this temple, it will only be there for a short time. So keep that in mind. Some of the things I'm going to do this week are just follow-ups from what I did last week. For example, I talked a little bit about this Pokemon craze. I don't think it's a good thing. Here's an example from a church out west. There are 6 Pokestops located on the campus of this church. So they're inviting people to come. I have problems with this, but this is a tweet from the pastor saying, please come, you can play your Pokemon game here. I have problems with what's behind the Pokemon game. That's all I'm going to say. Here's a picture of a fire that's taking place in Southern California near Santa Clarita. This is a video shot yesterday from a helicopter by one of the local news stations. You can see that the fire is raging. It's really burnt, I think, 5,500 acres in about a day. Last I heard, it was only about 10% contained. This has become one of the most contentious elections. People have written to me, and I don't know if they're criticizing me or just asking me why I haven't done it, but why haven't I been harder on Donald Trump? And why do I only talk about Hillary Clinton and that sort of thing? So let me just say this. I agree with what Ted Cruz said. Vote your conscience in the election. But elections have consequences. If you want to vote, vote. And decide on who you want based on your own conscience, and pray about it and decide what you should do. But there are real consequences involved in this election. Now listen, with Hillary, I know what we get. We get a changed Supreme Court. We get changed national security, a further deterioration in our national security. I cannot guarantee you it will be better under Donald Trump. I don't know if it will be better. It's possible. I do think we're in very serious, dire straits as a nation. I think we are on the decline. I think we are under God's judgment. And at best, I view this as I don't view Mr. Trump as a savior or anything of the sort. In fact, I don't know pretty much anybody that does. At best, I think what will happen is he might slow things down a little bit. I can't guarantee that. That's just my thinking on it as I analyze it. We think that the return of the Lord is near. We don't know for certain. Now, all the indicators are that it is, and that's how I teach and base my analysis and what I look at and what I see. But we have to also acknowledge the possibility that it might extend out for a number of years. We all have children. I had dinner the other night, and one of my great nieces was there. She's around 5 or 6. And what's going on in the law and at the Supreme Court and in the executive branch of the government are very troubling things that I think will have an impact on everybody's kid. And so that's why I'm making a calculus as to who I'm going to vote for. And one of those decisions is what's going on legally and what's going on in the courts. Now, in Virginia, they have had a law for a number of times, it might be constitutional, that says that felons, convicted felons, even after they serve their time, cannot vote. The governor, Terry McAuliffe, who's very close to the Clintons, knows that Virginia is a swing state in this election. It used to vote pretty much Republican all the time. It's flipped over to the Democratic column in the last couple of elections, I believe. So one of the ways they do this is they assume that convicted felons will vote Democratic. So he issued an executive order a few months ago to have all the convicted felons allowed to vote in the upcoming election. He did this by executive fiat. It was contrary to the Constitution and the law of the state of Virginia. He is a lawless man. He has worked with the Clintons. I think you will continue to see that kind of activity on an epic scale if a certain candidate is elected. Now, what happened was that the Virginia Supreme Court came out with a decision this week that said that McAuliffe's actions were unconstitutional. They could not be justified. So McAuliffe has then taken this up. He gets the decision. I think it came out on Thursday, and then yesterday it was reported by a left-wing website, thinkprogress.org, that the Virginia governor is now bypassing the court ruling to help 100,000 ex-felons vote. And how's he doing this? He's issuing limited orders of clemency to give them the right to vote. Now, listen, this is what you're going to get with a certain candidate. I guarantee that you will get this. You heard what the Attorney General of the United States said about her. Okay, now I'm not building up the other guy. I want you to know that. But I'm telling you what I know for a fact based on the record of what I see. So this is what's going to happen. And so you're going to see things like this. You're going to see this with regard to borders and immigration policy and other things. And you're going to see it with respect to the Supreme Court. And here's an article from the Wall Street the other day that says the reshaping of the Supreme Court is likely. Now, a certain candidate, female candidate for president, got up and announced just the other day in a rally, and she said this: "Today I'm announcing that in my first 30 days as president, I will propose a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and give the American people, all of us, the chance to reclaim our democracy." Now listen, this is pure politics, but I want you to know that she wants to change the Constitution and the right of free speech that the Supreme Court has recently ruled that we all have, and that's to give collectively through corporate organizations and PACs of that sort. They don't like that. They don't mind that unions give money to candidates. That's fine. But if it's people who have different interests, they don't want them to give money to participate in the election process. It's the way it is. That's what they want to do. Wall Street said this: "These seeming good government reforms mask what has become a hardball tactic by the left to silence its opposition. State attorneys general such as New York's Eric Schneiderman," and I've talked about this, and California's Kamala Harris, and I believe she's running for governor there, are attempting to force nonprofits to disclose their donors, making them easy targets for liberal groups who want to harass and intimidate individual donors. And this will be done. The donor lists were obtained by liberal activist groups with regard to California Proposition 8. That was the amendment that provided that marriage in California would be between a man and a woman. And they have gone after people. For example, there was one person who was a restaurant owner, and his restaurant eventually, I believe, went out of business because of these tactics. The executive, I believe the CEO of Firefox, of Mozilla, was fired from his job because he had given to the Proposition 8 campaign. What I'm telling you is that there is a move of corporate fascism about. The government has some restrictions on it in the Constitution, but corporations are going to move and they're going to restrict the rights of free speech. And if you want to take a certain position, you can. You're free to do it, but you're going to lose your job. We've already seen it happen in a number of circumstances. The Mozilla CEO, there was the man who is a health director, Department of Health employee down in Atlanta. This is going to happen. It'll happen on a much larger scale if a certain candidate gets selected. That's all I'm stating is the facts. You still make up your own mind. Here's another. I don't know. This shows, I guess, sort of the the madness that's gripping people, and they're losing the ability to reason. This was reported the other day. The Alaska High Court has ruled that the parental notification for abortion is unconstitutional. Now, why would what Alaska did was said if a minor is going to have an abortion, there has to be 48 hours notice given to her parents. Doesn't ban the abortion or anything like that. It just says notice. If that kid wants to get a tattoo under the age of 18 in Alaska, they can't get one under any circumstances. But you can abort, you can take a human life if you are under 18. But I want you to look at the reasoning for this. The question that was presented to the court, and Dan Winfrey is the justice that wrote the majority opinion. It was a 4-3 decision, I believe, of the Alaska Supreme Court. And it said, does the notification law violate the Alaska Constitution's equal protection guarantee by unjustifiably burdening the fundamental privacy rights only of minors seeking pregnancy termination rather than applying equally to all pregnant minors? That question is framed in a way that it seems a bit unreasonable. The notification law was with respect to pregnant minors who were seeking an abortion. And so what the court is at, the question that was framed by the abortion rights advocates was, well, that's unfair. That's unequal protection because you're not doing anything with regard to pregnant minors who don't want to get an abortion. Now, this is insanity on, I've used the term a number of times today, epic scale. Here's the conclusion of the court. This just does not, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Conclusion, Justice Winfrey writing, we must conclude that the state's asserted interests do not justify a distinction between pregnant minors seeking to terminate and those seeking to carry to term. Despite the factual differences between the two classes of pregnant minors, as a matter of law, they are similarly situated with respect to the notification law. The notification law is under-inclusive because the governmental interests asserted in this case are implicated for all pregnant minors as they face reproductive choices and as they live with their decisions. And the asserted justifications for disparate treatment based upon a minor's actual reproductive choice are unconvincing. This is madness. This is illogical. This makes absolutely no sense. But this is the type of person that one party will appoint to the Supreme Court. And when they have the opportunity to appoint these justices to the Supreme Court, that will affect constitutional rights and court decisions for a generation. That's one of the critical issues that is at stake in this election. And I can guarantee you what will happen if Hillary Clinton is enacted. I am uncertain what will happen if Donald Trump is elected. But I know with certainty what will happen if she is elected. So that is part of my own personal calculus in deciding who I'm going to vote for. You will see things such as this. Here's a report about what is going on with regard to the NBA All-Star game that was supposed to take place in Charlotte next year.
NBA Commissioner Adam Silver told reporters last week, quote, "We were frankly hoping that they would make some steps toward modifying the legislation, and frankly, I was disappointed that they didn't," close quote. The law bans local municipalities from enacting ordinances to protect gay, bisexual, and transgender people. In June, Silver said, quote, "I speak on behalf of our owners, our teams, and our players. I think they all feel very strongly that this is a core principle of our league, and that where we choose to celebrate something like an all-star game, that those values should be honored."
Now, I want you to catch the irony here that the all-male NBA has said that they have to honor diversity. This, I believe, it fits the definition of hypocrisy. I believe the PGA Tour has made similar announcements, and there's several PGA Tour events that take place in North Carolina each year. And I believe the threat is that unless North Carolina takes that, they're going to changes their law. they're going to get away. And by the way, it's not all owners in the NBA. In fact, one of the owners of the Charlotte Hornets, who is to be the host team for the All-Star game next year, has come out and said, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't think the NBA has a right to do this. They need to butt out and leave North Carolina and its legislature make the decisions about what law applies in North Carolina. But the owner or the governor came out and said this. The governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, I believe is his name, the sports and entertainment elite, Attorney General Roy Cooper, and the liberal media have for months misrepresented our laws and have maligned the people of North Carolina simply because most people believe boys and girls should not be able to use school bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers without the opposite sex present. 21 other states have joined North Carolina to challenge the federal overreach by the Obama administration mandating their bathroom policies in all businesses and schools instead of allowing accommodations for unique circumstances. Left-wing special interest groups have no moral authority to try and intimidate the large majority of American parents who agree in common sense bathroom and shower privacy for our children. But this is where it's going. The corporate fascists are running amok. And unless it's restricted, it will only get worse, and people will start to lose their jobs. I guarantee it. The governor continued, American families should be on notice that the selective corporate elite are imposing their political will on communities in which they do business, thus bypassing the democratic and legal process. So that's where we stand, and this is what we can expect to continue. I don't have time to talk about the next one, so I'm going to skip it. This is an interesting thing from Israel. I'm probably going to shift towards the Middle East and some other issues now. Unlikely baby boom alters Israeli-Palestinian demographics. Now, this was reported in Caroline Glick's book, The One-State Solution, about she thinks that there should just be one state, a state of Israel there. One of the things that people have, the argument of the left is, well, this will destroy the Jewish character of the state of Israel because the Palestinians are having more babies and they will overwhelm them demographically, and it will be a majority Arab Muslim population, and therefore the Jewish people will be oppressed in their own land. But the statistics don't show that. In fact, I think these lines that you see, the graph that you see in this this article, I think the lines have probably already crossed, and the Jews are having more babies than the Arabs. This is destroying one of the arguments as a necessity for the two-state solution. And Caroline does a great job in her book about talking about that. I'm only going to say this. I don't have a lot of comments about this. They've upgraded the fence at the White House. They've had some security breaches, but when they did a video of it on ABC, they were taking this thing of the fence, and somebody caught this part of the fence. Now, can I say for certain what that is? Yeah, I think I can. I think it should be obvious to you what that is. Now, how long that's been there, I have no idea. But I'm just telling you is that is part of the fence at the White House. You can see the north entrance to the north side of the White House behind you. I'll let you make your own conclusions as to what is in the red box. Update on the Malaysian flight, Flight 370 that crashed last year in the Indian Ocean, or disappeared. They found a couple pieces they said were from the plane. What they found, and what was not in the report, but this is from the New York Post and a number of other news sources are reporting, that they have it on good authority that the pilot had used Microsoft Flight Simulator to fly path of the plane to land in the Indian Ocean on his flight simulator. he had built a very sophisticated flight simulator in his apartment, and he had practiced taking the exact routes that it appears that the flight took, at least based on current thinking. So it was a planned murder-suicide, mass murder-suicide. A computer hack has now led to the Islamic State issuing yet another death list of about 1,000 people. They got a lot of information from somebody that had stolen the information off of the internet. Now, there's a number of these lists that the Islamic State has put out. I don't know that they've been made public. I don't know that they've been circulated, and I don't know that our Homeland Security and FBI have contacted all the people that are on the list. I've heard there are people that have been notified, but I've also heard that there are a lot of people who have not been notified. Well, the week started off like it seems most weeks starts off. We, of course, had the slaying of the police officers in Baton Rouge. And then we had an Afghan immigrant take an axe to about 21 people. He was seeking asylum in Germany. I believe he was from Afghanistan. And he took an axe to about 21 people on a train in Germany and injured them. This is a common thing. And then just the other day, a couple days ago, in Munich, at a mall outside of a McDonald's, a man started shooting. It turns out that this man there was 9 killed. He eventually committed suicide. They said it was a lone gunman. As is common in these situations, there's a lot of chaos when these things start, and so there are multiple reports, and sometimes there's multiple shooters, and if the person's on the move, it might seem like there's multiple ones. I don't know. They're pretty sure it was only one person. That's what they're saying. But it shut down Munich. One guy shut down Munich. This only feeds what the Islamic State and other terrorists want to do. They want to create chaos and terror. You can see here in the picture on the right, you can see the man start shooting. There are reports that he had posted something to lure children to the McDonald's, and I believe most of the dead were young people. He himself was 18 years old. There's some dispute as to what he was shouting when he did the shooting. There are a number of people that said he was shouting Allahu Akbar. There's some saying that he wasn't. I don't believe there's any audio of what he said. He was a German Persian, although I've heard that he might be Assyrian, and that there's some indication that he might actually be a Syrian immigrant. But I don't know. He started at the McDonald's in the upper left-hand corner and proceeded to go to the Olympia Mall, over to the parking garage, where he apparently committed suicide.
Assess for me, please, the psychology of this attack and what it's going to do to the psyche of Germany. Because Germany and much of Europe has been split, divided by the recent terror attacks, some of which have been blamed upon migrants, all of whom were invited into the country by Germany's leader, Angela Merkel. Now this attack, regardless of who the perpetrators are, a new terror attack, and it shut down Munich. What does that do to the psyche of Germany?
Well, you're absolutely right.
This is Sebastian Gorka.
Was the standard bearer of open borders to migrants into the EU. She said, as Chancellor of Germany, there is no limit to the amount of immigrants, refugees we will accept as a nation from North Africa, the Middle East, and so forth. So she is now the lightning rod, and unfortunately she just left on vacation. Her interior minister left on vacation, so she's going to be feeling the heat wherever she is right now, because the question is Germany now more unsafe, because of the migrants. Look at Nice, look at Brussels, and now do we have a double threat in terms of a potential racist, bigoted backlash of people who said enough is enough and I'm going to use terrorism to respond. That's a double whammy for Angela Merkel if it proves to be the case.
That was Sebastian Gorka commenting on the shooting in Munich. Here's another report. This is a representative on one of the security committees in the House of Representatives.
Reaction now to all of this from California Republican Ed Royce. He's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's in Hollywood tonight. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brett.
You know, you listen to this, and obviously we're waiting to see all of the details and getting the latest from authorities there as this hunt continues. They think other people may have been involved, and they are still locking down Munich. What are your thoughts as you see this develop today?
Well, Brett, first our hearts go out to the victims, all of the victims of this attack. But a couple of observations, and one would be the sheer number of terrorist attacks that have occurred in Europe. Just since the attacks in Paris, you've had 284 people killed, close to 1,000 injured in these attacks, and law enforcement is overwhelmed. That's what I've heard from the security forces there. And at the same time, the attacks primarily inspired by ISIS, but over the last few years you also have groups like the Nazi underground that have attacked in Germany and killed some 11 immigrants. So you have these different terrorist cells. We don't know yet which type of terrorist or brand is carrying out these attacks, but what you do know is law enforcement is overwhelmed. And part of this has been our failure to take ISIS out early enough, which is what we should have done, because now they have the ability to recruit, and they're sending people back who are overwhelming the capabilities, and not just anymore on the battlefield, now also on the internet.
Well, John Kerry was at a conference in, I believe, in Germany this week, and of course he weighed in on the terrorism issue, but really to him what was the more important issue, and it was reported that he said this: refrigerator chemicals are just as bad as ISIS. Yesterday I met in Washington with 45 nations, defense ministers, and foreign ministers as we were working together on the challenge of the Islamic State and terrorism. It's hard for some people to grasp it, but what you, are doing here right now is of equal importance because it has the ability to literally save life on the planet itself. Yes, that's what John Kerry thinks is important. So I think we need to come up with a bumper sticker. I would propose no AC for DC. No AC for DC. Just the District of Columbia. I don't want a District of Columbia. I have friends who live in the suburbs in Maryland. I don't want to impose a burden on them. But federal government buildings across the country and the District of Columbia, no AC for you. If you don't think that if you think it's this dangerous, then step up and do your part. No AC for DC. Here is a report from, or some commentary from former UN Ambassador John Bolton on what happened in Munich.
Well, we have completely contradictory reports of eyewitnesses, some of whom say they heard the shooter yell Allahu Akbar. Others heard him say, "I'm a German, blank the foreigners," and similar remarks. So we don't know, but let's be clear, the risk of civil war inside several European countries is very real. Patrick Hovar, who's the head of the French Director General of Internal Security, DGSI, said in a public speech about 2 weeks ago he could see civil war in France, and he predicted that it might be occasioned by kind of an incident of massive sexual assault on women as occurred in Cologne, Germany, New Year's Eve, that could set it off. Whether this is a right-wing extremist in Germany, we don't know at this point. But I think when you put 1 million unvetted refugees into a country like Germany, you're going to have cultural clashes. It's not to justify it, obviously, but to say it wouldn't surprise me if after Axe attacks on German trains and the attack we saw in Nice, it's 1 o'clock in the morning in Munich now. This is a direct parallel to what happened in Nice in the evening of Bastille Day on July the 14th. So in the midst of this uncertainty, it's obviously difficult to know whether there was one gunman or more than one gunman, but let's get this prospect of civil war in one or more European countries out on the table, because it's real.
It's astounding when you think that an entire city of Munich is locked down right now, third largest city in Germany. The second time in a week that they've had something that's, last week we on the train and now this.
And this attack near the site of the Munich Olympics attack, near the...
From 72?
Exactly, near the site of the Munich railway station, where literally hundreds of thousands of refugees from the Middle East have been coming through. That's the main entry point into Germany over the past year. So it's the kind of locus of that conflict between civilizations, where you could well see something like this as the beginning, I'm afraid.
Well, a German theologian, I believe he's with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Germany. I don't know if there's a relationship to the U.S. German Church, says that radical Bible groups are a bigger threat to teens than Islamism. That's exactly what he said. Listen to this article. During the interview, in which the theologian was asked to advise parents of how to look out for signs of Islamic radicalization, he told parents not to panic and advised them rather to be more prepared to keep watch for warning signs of Christian radicalization. As the threat of sects in use, be prepared for radical Bible groups. They are a much bigger problem than the Islamists. He did not mean to equate the terrorist organization with Christian fundamentalists, but rather draw a comparison of how Bible study groups outside of mainstream Christianity radically distort the Bible with how Salafist groups twist the Quran. He stated, such cases of Christian radicalization are purely numerically up more frequently than the current 3 known cases of successful Islamist radicalization in Saxony. This man, I'm telling you, I'm almost without words to describe the madness that I'm seeing taking place around the world today. It's really unbelievable. However, there was a study released just recently in Germany that found that young devout Muslims in Germany are more prone to violence. Somebody needs to go talk to this theologian. And remember, there's very often not a direct connection between education and wisdom. Foreign Policy has an article this week that says that the immigration crisis is tearing Germany apart. Here is Thomas de Maizière, who insisted that there is no link between refugees and terrorist attacks. That is a German interior minister this week. 2 attacks in Germany, no link between refugees and terrorist attacks. I believe this is another interview with Sebastian Gorka about the attack in Munich.
Welcome back to Fox News Alert. 9 people shot dead in a Munich mall, marking the 3rd major attack in Western Europe in the last 8 days. We're now learning more about the shooter, but the question many are asking this morning is, how did the gunman get his hands on a gun in a nation with strict gun laws?
Joining us now to discuss is the chair of military theory at the Marine Corps University and the author of Defeating Jihad, a terrific book. He's our friend, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Doctor, it's great to see you this morning. So Angela Merkel lets in more than 1 million mostly Muslim refugees without really vetting any of them. Is it a surprise that her country is now facing attacks like this?
No, not at all, Tucker. The fact is we have a continent at war. Look at what we've had in just the last few months or last year and a half. We have 2 Paris attacks. We've had a Brussels bombing attack. We had Nice just over a week ago, and now we have the German attack. So this is the new normal that we have to put up with, and the policies of the EU crats, the bureaucrats in Brussels, and the politicians have really facilitated this kind of attack and the exploitation by ISIS. We know ISIS has used the refugee streams. One of the Brussels attackers was on a false passport and had been given refugee status in the EU. So this is the new norm, Tucker.
Dr. Gorka, we've been monitoring a press conference that's going on here in Munich, and so we're trying to figure out exactly what the motive here is. But it may not have anything to do with radical Islam. There are reports that they think that he was getting psychiatric care, he was really depressed. But is there a threat that people who are disenchanted and who are mentally ill are going to do copycat attacks, you know, maybe not in honor of the same belief system as ISIS, but still cause the same carnage?
It's not out of the question, but I'd be really very cautious with any of these initial reports that are trying to explain away what this person did. Remember, we had reports yesterday that this was a neo-Nazi wearing hobnail boots. I mean, it's so strange how there's this reflex reaction to almost excuse away the terrorist attacks, whether it's the utterly fallacious reports that here in America the Orlando killer was some kind of crypto-homosexual with repressed tendencies that he wanted to take out in some kind of revenge attack, or whether it's yesterday the guy's a Caucasian neo-Nazi. Let's try and not make excuses for these individuals and wait until we find out. We know for a fact this man was a German Iranian. I think that's more important than any other hypothesis about his mental state right now.
Well, let's move over to Turkey. One more thing. And we have the Olympics coming up very shortly in Rio, and it appears that their security apparatus is not doing very well and getting into place. They've only hired, I believe, about 20% of the people that they believe are necessary to handle the security at the upcoming Olympics, which I think starts in a week or so. So South America has been pretty free of terrorist attacks. Let's hope that it continues. Let's hope that we have the same results down there that we had with the Republican convention in Cleveland, which was relatively violence and incident-free in terms of protests. Okay, let's talk about Turkey. There are a lot of theories floating around about Turkey. What happened? Was it a staged coup? Did Erdogan make it up? Was it really a coup? Was it just ineptly executed? I don't know that at this point it really makes much of a difference. It's going to be very difficult to get hard facts about exactly what happened because of the purge that's now taking place in Turkey. So maybe it was staged, maybe it wasn't. The end result of that, though, is probably the same in that Erdogan has increased his stature in the Islamic world. That's probably the biggest takeaway that you should take out of Turkey. Now, look, Turkey is a very important part of the Bible and Bible prophecy. The 7 churches of Revelation were there. It's where Noah's Ark landed. There are future prophecies in Daniel 8, Daniel 11 that seem to implicate Turkey. Ezekiel 38 pretty much identifies Turkey as one of the players in that invasion of Israel. And I do think that this reinvigoration of an Islamic state in Turkey, directly north of Israel, is very significant prophetically. Now, exactly how that plays out, I don't know. There are people that have been suggesting that Erdogan is the one. He's the Antichrist. I say we need to wait and see on that. Let's see how this plays out. There's a lot of different views about that, and I think it's way too early to take a dogmatic view about something like that. But it is true that Turkey does have a role in the end-time prophetic scenarios For example, you see number 8 on this list, the Euphrates River will dry up. That river originates in Turkey. The Central Asian Stan republics, and we've talked a lot about this over the years, I've talked a lot about this over the years, are Turk in their orientation. So we have a Turkey is an important country. A lot of Muslims, for over 400 years, or for about 400 years, Turkey was the leader of the Islamic world. And a lot of Muslims still look to them as the leader of the Muslim world. And Erdogan has tried to make himself the leader of the Muslim world. It's been part of his process all along. So this is no surprise that he's moving along. I wrote an article about this at least 4.5 years ago. I can't find a copy of it, but I did write it. And at the time, I thought that Erdogan was consolidating power, and he continues to do that. Now, again, and you should know Turkey is a significant country. If you look at NATO countries, and Turkey is part of NATO, Turkey has the second largest military in NATO, the largest in Europe. So it is not an inconsequential country. It has the 17th largest economy in the world. It's much, much larger in terms of its economic, mainly because of population, than Israel. So it's not an inconsequential country, and it is, I believe, a player in the end-time prophetic scenarios. But when the coup took place, the Obama administration came out and said that we needed to have people support the democratically elected government of Turkey, which was the Erdogan administration. Now, what has happened since that coup took place, the failed coup, whether staged or not, we don't know for sure, but there has been a massive crackdown and purge of people from all walks of life and from different institutions throughout Turkey society. There's been a 3-month state of emergency declared. Erdogan seems to be stronger than he ever was. He has fired educators. He has fired police, fired military, and imprisoned thousands of people. Now, there's no doubt Turkey has had coups in the past, and this may have been part of those coups. It clearly was ineptly executed. One of the things that you want to do in a coup is you want to imprison or kill the leader. That didn't happen, and Erdogan was able to take to social media and get people out into the streets that supported him, and they came out by the thousands. He is very popular, especially among the Islamists in Turkey, and he has consolidated power. Now, there is a guy who lives in the Poconos named Gulen, Gulen, and Gulen is a Muslim imam. He is called in some circles a moderate Muslim imam. He lives in the Poconos. He's been here. He and Erdogan for a time were allies. When Erdogan was mayor of Istanbul, Erdogan quoted from an Islamic poem that talked about the minarets of the mosque are our bayonets. I don't have the exact quote handy right now, but because of him quoting that, he was actually imprisoned for a time. Erdogan himself was imprisoned for a time and was banned for life from politics. But he was able to come back and essentially become the Islamic dictator of Turkey. For a time, he and Gulen were very closely aligned, but they had a falling out. Gulen fled from Turkey for his life, and he's lived in the Poconos ever since. He does a radio broadcast and that type of thing. He is now claimed to be the one that is, Erdogan is claiming that he is behind the plot to bring down his government. Look at the numbers in the purge. 1,481 judges and prosecutors have been arrested and jailed. 1,577 university department heads forced to resign. 6,300 military personnel arrested and jailed. Almost 9,000 at the Interior Ministry. 21,000 licenses have been revoked at private educational institutions, and 21,738 have been suspended at the Ministry of Education. Now, clearly, Erdogan, because he moved so quickly, this is what's led a lot of people to conclude that this was a staged coup, that Erdogan did the coup. And because he's done the purge so quickly, this proves that he had this plan. I'm only going to suggest to you that may be true. That may be true, but it may not be true. He is a dictator. He is a tyrant. Dictators and tyrants have enemy lists that they keep at the ready at all times. And it may very well be that when the coup was attempted and failed, that Erdogan quickly moved against his enemies list. Now, what he has done over time, starting, probably 10 years ago now, he engaged in a number of purges of secularists called Kemalists from the Turkish military. He got rid of the generals that, in the way Turkey was constructed, was that, in its constitution, was that the military was really sort of the brakes on any Islamic movement, religious movement coming to take control of the government. And when they thought it was getting out of control in the past, 3 or 4 times in the last 50 years, the Turkish military has taken control of the government, and the Constitution has been rewritten in those cases. So it could be that this is exactly what happened this time. I'm not certain. It could be that the military did try to take control. They didn't do a very good job. Of that we are all certain. There's allegations that Gulen is leading this. For a number of years, Erdogan has allowed people who lean towards the Gulen movement to remain in their positions because they were Islamic in their orientation and they served Erdogan's purpose. But there have been reports come out that Erdogan was clinging to power. He was concerned about where it was going. People were getting concerned that he had too much power. There was a Gulen-oriented newspaper I used to use its headlines a lot called Zaman, Z-A-M-A-N. That newspaper ceased publication back in March. Erdogan shut it down because he was afraid of what they were saying. But that newspaper was clearly aligned with the Gulen movement. Now, back in the latter part of 2011, 60 Minutes did, and I reported on this in my update at that time, 60 Minutes did a segment on the Gulen movement. And they cited there that there were Gulen-supported charter schools located in 26 states of the United States, over 100. There are over 1,000 worldwide. They claim to be very technocratic in their orientation, but they are Islamic schools. Of this, there is no doubt. They're often called the Harmony schools. And they're located all the way across the United States. So, Erdogan and Gulen has always been very big on technology and education. He says you should study science because it helps you learn about God. But there's 1,000 worldwide. You can imagine how many of these schools there would be in Turkey itself. That is why Erdogan has gone and taken 20,000 educators out of their positions. The word today was they're looking to hire 20,000 educators for this fall. So while the purge is going on and Erdogan is elevating himself, enhancing his stature in the Islamic world. At the same time, you need to understand that so while Erdogan is conducting this purge to elevate his stature in the Islamic world and among the people of Turkey, it is also in some respects undermining him. You can't pull 40,000 people or more that he's already purged out of important key positions within Turkish society. That has an impact, and that will have an impact on the country for years. Some intelligence analysts think that Turkey has hurt itself militarily. I'll make a comment on that in a moment. That may very well be the case, but that leads to, but if Turkey is weakened militarily, that will lead Turkey to go into alliances with people. Now, some thought that he would go into an alliance with the United States, but I personally think that he would be more likely to go into an alliance with Russia and Iran because they are in the area, and he has this problem on his southern border with Syria falling apart, the immigrants coming across his borders, the Islamic State, his problem with the Kurds, and he wants to maintain power. So he's going to align with, he's a pragmatist, he's an Islamist and a pragmatist, and he's going to take whoever he thinks he can get. He's arrested military leaders and put them in prison. Here's one of the leading commanders in the Turkish military being led off to jail. He's imposed a state of emergency that's going to last for at least 3 months. 9,000 people have been arrested and jailed. They've suspended parts of the Constitution, and there are moves in the legislature to give him the ability to go in and enact laws that he wants to put in place. Now, he's an Islamist, so you can imagine what he's going to put in place. In one of the foreign policy analysts, I think this comes from the Council on Foreign Relations, I'm not sure, just says this: welcome to the Turkish winter. The Great Purge is just beginning. This was written a few days ago. Prepare for 4 major dynamics. The first and most obvious involves the purges, lots of them, and of Turks from every walk of life. The thousands of officers and judges already detained are just the beginning. In doing so, Erdogan will be motivated by both fear and opportunity. Despite the surprisingly amateurish performance of the coup plotters, the failure of the coup plot was hardly preordained, but instead resulted from 2 specific factors. Now, this is how some of the foreign policy analysts look at it, and I think they have a point. Another article, Turkey in the case of the magical vanishing coup, said this: little now stands in Erdogan's way. The next few days, weeks, and months will tell us what he intends to do with the unprecedented power and opportunity he now has at his disposal. In Turkey's conspiracy theory-loving culture, some are even speculating that the whole fiasco was staged by Erdogan in order to engineer justifications for what he is now about to inflict on those he sees as his enemies. In any case, he seems to find power irresistible. He used social media. Another report from Foreign Policy: the Turkish internet is a battleground and Erdogan is winning. He was very effective in the way that he used social media to get people out into the streets. The other thing that he did was this Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, from which the United States has, I believe it's called a Status of Forces Agreement with Turkey that allows us to use this base. From this base, most of the air operations that are undertaken by the United States in the Middle East are centered at this air base. When things started to go, this is in the northeast corner of the Mediterranean, and you see Syria along the eastern edge of the Mediterranean there. You can see almost all the way down to Lebanon here. Damascus would be off the screen at the bottom. But this is a very key air base for the United States. When these things started to unfold in Turkey, Erdogan cut the power to the air base. The power remained off for 5 days. There are at least 50 nuclear warheads, hydrogen bomb warheads, located at the air base. There are concerns because of what appears to be an alignment between Erdogan or some people in the Erdogan administration, including his son in the Islamic State, that this would expose those weapons to being taken by the Islamic State or other terrorist groups. Now, they may not be able to operate without the codes, but you don't want them to fall into those hands. And so for 5 days, our airbase had to operate on emergency generators. Now, the power has been turned back on, but the key thing to take away from this is Erdogan used that event to build himself up to build up his stature in the Islamic world. Because look at him, I'm taking on the great Satan. I alone. And listen, with the Obama administration, he knew that it was very unlikely that anything was going to happen. But power's now been restored to the base, and things seem to be returning a little bit to normal. But Erdogan used this as a method to build himself up. In the current issue of The Economist, or last week's issue of The Economist, they talk about some scenarios, the world if, and it's interesting the symbols that The Economist uses when they talk about this. And, they talk about what do we do? What happens if Donald Trump takes power? What happens if North Korea continues on the path that it's on? People like to play these scenarios out to see what's going to happen. Now, we have the advantage, we have some ability to analyze things, I think, a little bit better because of the scriptures telling us things that are going to happen. This is from the Los Angeles Times the other day. What if Donald Trump gets elected? And this man, James Kirchick, is suggesting that if Donald Trump is elected, there may be a military coup in the United States like they tried to do with Erdogan. I personally don't think that that's much of a possibility, but I'm just telling you this is what people on the left are talking about in our country today. So Turkey remains a very pivotal player in the Middle East and in the unfolding of the prophetic scriptures and things that we know are going to come about in the end times. Now, Caroline Glick, and I'll close with this, had a good article this week in her Friday column, Turkey, Roger, over and out. Here's some of the things she says about this. Stoltenberg's claim that the Turkish military is as strong as ever is simply ridiculous. A third of the serving generals are behind bars, along with thousands of commanders and soldiers, educators, police officers, jurists, and judges. Turkey is a NATO member with open borders to Europe, and the only thing that has prevented ISIS terrorists from bringing certain chemical weapons to Europe has been the Turkish military and police force. They are now being purged. And I shared Caroline Glick's concerns in this regard. Erdogan used out-and-out jihadists to put down the coup on Friday night and Saturday. He has continued to embrace them in the days that have passed since then, and he would, because that's what he is. He himself is that. In his early days as a politician, that's how he was acting. In so doing, Erdogan signaled that he may well use the post-coup state of emergency to dismantle what is left of Turkey's secular state apparatus and transform the NATO member into an Islamist state. He's well down the road to that, along the lines of the short-lived Muslim Brotherhood regime in Egypt, which Erdogan enthusiastically supported. In fact, he went to Egypt during that time and he received a hero's welcome. He is a Muslim Brotherhood person himself, Erdogan. In this climate, Caroline says, it is difficult, if not as a practical matter, impossible, to imagine that the military police will work particularly hard to prevent ISIS terrorists from transporting weapons of mass destruction from Syria through Europe to, In this climate, it is difficult, if not as a practical matter, impossible to imagine that the military and police will work particularly hard to prevent ISIS terrorists from transporting weapons of mass destruction from Syria to Europe through Turkey. And I think she's right. So, what to make of it? The world is in a state of flux. Things are happening rapidly, and we need to keep our eyes on the Word of God and the news, because this will help us to be informed in the things and steps that we need to take as believers in this world. It does appear that time is getting short, and we need to make ourselves right with God. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another update.